Good morning. Welcome to the July webinar from the Loveless Healthy Steps program at Loveless Health Plan. My name's Chris Porche. I'm the Healthy Steps manager, and I have a Bachelor of Science in Health Education and a master's degree in management. I've been providing health education for more than 20 years, and I'm really happy to be here to be talking to you today about this topic, which is managing fatigue. But before I begin, I do want to cover a few housekeeping issues. The presentation will last about 20 or 30 minutes, depending on how fast I talk. And then, although we can't take live questions, I do want to encourage you to send an email to us if you have any questions at the healthysteps@loveless.com mailbox. You can expect to hear back from us in about 48 hours at the maximum. We try to turn those around more quickly, though. We also appreciate your feedback about our presentations. You'll be getting an evaluation via email after the presentation's over, and we would like you to please take a few minutes to complete that. It really is very short, doesn't take much time at all. And finally, if for some reason you get disconnected, just call back in. The program will still be progressing, and you can jump in at any point. So today we're going to cover these topics. I'll be discussing why fatigue is an important issue. We'll cover some of the signs and symptoms of fatigue. We'll talk about sleep physiology and how much sleep we actually need. I'll go over the causes of fatigue and sleep problems, and then we'll cover recommendations on how to improve sleep. So let me just say that if you find it difficult to get out of bed in the morning, or you sometimes feel sleepy while watching television or driving, you're probably one of the many millions of Americans who suffer from excessive sleepiness. This is a condition that can significantly reduce the quality of life, decrease productivity, and interfere with relationships. Most people do feel tired occasionally, but excessive sleepiness that persists is not normal and it is not healthy. So, what's the big deal about fatigue? Well, excessive sleepiness is not just a matter of feeling lousy. It really can affect mood, relationships at work, health, and your quality of life. According to the National Sleep Foundation's 2008 Sleep in America poll, 36% of Americans drive drowsy or fall asleep while driving. 29% of Americans fall asleep or become very sleepy at work. 20% have lost interest in sex because they're too sleepy. 14% report having to miss family events, work functions, and leisure activities in the past month due to sleepiness. So there are a number of studies that do make it clear that sleep deprivation is dangerous. Sleep-deprived people who are tested by using a driving simulator or by performing hand-eye coordination tasks perform as badly or worse than those who are intoxicated. Sleep deprivation also magnifies alcohol's effects on the body. So if a fatigued person who drinks, will become much more impaired than someone who's well rested. Driver fatigue is responsible for an estimated 100,000 motor vehicle accidents and 1,500 deaths each year, and this is according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And since drowsiness is the brain's last step before falling asleep, driving while drowsy can and often does lead to disaster. Caffeine and other stimulants simply can't overcome the effects of severe sleep deprivation. You know, the National Sleep Foundation also says that if you have trouble keeping your eyes focused, if you can't stop yawning, or if you can't remember driving the last few miles, you probably have been driving too drowsy and it is not safe. And according to the researchers Michael H. Bonnet and Donna L. Armand, they say there's a strong evidence that sufficient shortening or disturbance of the sleep process compromises mood, performance, alertness, and can result in injury or death. So it's no small matter. So what are the symptoms of fatigue? The most obvious signs are symptoms that include drowsiness, mood changes, depression, anxiety, loss of energy, sometimes loss of appetite. Individuals who suffer from fatigue may also have headaches, a lack of motivation. They can have trouble with concentration and alertness. It's also worth noting that symptoms can manifest themselves differently between genders. For example, men may be angry, whereas women may express more sadness and mood changes. So let's talk about some causes of fatigue. It's almost always related to lack of quality sleep. So one of the primary causes of excessive sleepiness among Americans is really self-imposed sleep deprivation. We skimp on sleep in hopes of getting more done. Widespread access to technology makes it possible to stay busy at the computer or the BlackBerry around the clock. I know I have, and I'm sure many of you have stayed up past their bedtime to watch a TV program, answer another email on the BlackBerry, or sometimes just read another chapter or two of a good book. But by some estimates, people now sleep about 20% less than they did a century ago. Working at night and sleeping during the day can also cause excessive sleepiness. Some people are able to adjust to such a schedule, but others may never overcome the body's natural tendency to be awake during the day and sleep at night. It's just the way we're built. I personally have worked evening and night shifts for many years at a hospital laboratory, and I was just one of those people who never really felt comfortable with that schedule. It didn't fit my body. I did it because I had to, but my body did not like it. It's similar to the phenomenon that occurs with jet lag, in which the body is out of sync with the natural environment, and over time that can cause trouble. So excessive sleepiness is also linked with a number of primary sleep disorders. For example, sleep-disordered breathing, sometimes called SDB, which includes snoring and obstructive sleep apnea, is also associated with excessive sleepiness. Because SDB can result in frequent interruptions during sleep, it can lead to abnormal sleepiness during waking hours, no matter how many hours that person actually spends in bed. So it's just not a good night's sleep. Sleep apnea is a disorder of interrupted breathing during sleep. It usually occurs in association with fat buildup or loss of muscle tone with aging around the throat tissues. These changes allow the windpipe to collapse during breathing and the muscles to relax during sleep. Obstructive sleep apnea is usually associated with loud snoring, though not everybody who snores actually has the disorder. Sleep apnea can occur if the neurons that control breathing malfunction during sleep. So during an episode of obstructive apnea, the person's efforts to inhale air create suction that actually collapses the windpipe. This blocks the airflow for 10 seconds to a minute while the person struggles to breathe. I remember my dad, sometimes we'd listen to him breathing in the other room, and he would stop breathing for so long we'd be afraid that he had died during the night. But then, he'd snort himself back awake. When that happens, a person's blood oxygen levels falls, and then the brain responds by awakening the person enough to tighten the upper airway muscles and then actually open that windpipe. This person may snort or gasp and then resume snoring. When the cycle's repeated hundreds of times a night, it really does become a problem. The frequent awakenings that sleep apnea patients experience leave them continually sleepy and may lead to personality changes, such as irritability or depression. Sleep apnea also deprives a person of oxygen, which can lead to morning headaches, a decline in mental functioning. It also is linked to high blood pressure, irregular heartbeats, and an increased risk of heart attacks and stroke. Patients with severe untreated sleep apnea are 2 to 3 times more likely to have an automobile accident than the general population. And in some high-risk individuals, sleep apnea may even lead to sudden death from respiratory arrest during stress. during sleep. So there's approximately 18 million Americans that have sleep apnea. However, few of them have had the problem actually diagnosed or treated. Patients with typical features of sleep apnea, such as loud snoring, obesity, and excessive daytime sleepiness, really should be referred to a specialist at a sleep center that can perform a test called a polysomnography. Boy, that's easy to say. This test records the patient's brain waves, heartbeat, and breathing during an entire sleep cycle. More causes for daytime fatigue include narcolepsy, which affects about 250,000 Americans. People with narcolepsy have frequent sleep attacks at various times during the day, even if they've had a normal amount of nighttime sleep. These attacks can last from several seconds to more than 30 minutes. People with narcolepsy may also experience cataplexy, which is a loss of muscle control during emotional situations. They can have hallucinations, temporary paralysis when they awaken, and disrupted nighttime sleep. So these symptoms seem to be features of the REM sleep cycle that appears during waking. This suggests that narcolepsy is a disorder of sleep regulation, and we'll talk a little bit more about REM sleep and the different cycles in a moment. The symptoms of narcolepsy typically appear during adolescence, though it often takes years to obtain a correct diagnosis. The disorder is usually hereditary, but it occasionally is linked to brain damage from a head injury or a neurological disease. But once narcolepsy is diagnosed, stimulants, antidepressants, or other drugs can help control the symptoms and prevent the embarrassing and dangerous effects of falling asleep at the wrong time. In 1999, a research team working with canine models identified a gene that causes narcolepsy. This was a breakthrough that brings a cure for this disabling condition within reach. The gene hypocretin receptor 2 codes for a protein that allows brain cells to receive instructions from other cells. The defective versions of the gene encode proteins that cannot recognize these messages and perhaps cut the cells off from messages that promote wakefulness. So researchers know that the same gene exists in humans, and they are currently researching for defective versions in people with narcolepsy. RLS, or restless leg syndrome, is another cause of daytime fatigue. It's a familial disorder causing unpleasant crawling, prickling, or tingling sensations in the legs and feet, and an urge to move them for relief. Is emerging as one of the most common sleep disorders, and is especially prevalent among older people. The disorder, which affects about 12 million Americans, leads to constant leg movement during the day and insomnia at night. Severe RLS is most common in elderly people, as I said, though symptoms may develop at any age. And in some cases it may be linked to other conditions such as anemia, pregnancy, or diabetes. Many RLS patients also have a disorder known as periodic limb movement disorder, or PLMD, which causes repetitive jerking movements of the limbs, especially the legs. These movements occur every 20 to 40 seconds and cause repeated awakenings and severely fragmented sleep. In one study, RLS and PLMD accounted for about a third of the insomnia seen in patients older than age 60. RLS and PLMD often can be relieved by drugs that affect the neurotransmitter dopamine, suggesting that dopamine abnormalities underlie both of these disorders.